Good morning. This is the August 13th, 2024 meeting of the Hudson Valley Board of Review. The hearing is being held via video conference at the following location: Portland Town Hall, 1 Hitty Street, Portland Manor, New York, 10567. The time is now 9:04 a.m. and this hearing is officially open. The members of the board are Megan Smaler to my left, Shaheen Badali to my right. And then we have two board members joining us remotely today, Jane Slavin and Mark Kavanaugh. And all the way off to my left is from the Department of State is Neil Collier. We will now hear the scheduled petitions. When you speak, please address the board and give your name, title, and legal address so that our court reporter can have all the information requested. You may have to stop from time to time to consult with our technical staff. In making comments to the board, please provide a descriptive narrative on matters referring to your exhibits to enable the court reporter to enter these into the record. When you are referring to a particular drawing or exhibit, just please make sure you state which exhibit it is, or drawing number, or whatever. Okay, so the first hearing is petition number 2024-0385. And the petitioner is the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival. The petition pertains to an appeal of the code official's determination regarding the occupancy of a building, 1 story, 35 feet in height, approximately 25,700 square feet in gross floor area, construction type 5B, wood frame, and located at 2015 US Route 9, Town of Phillipstown, County of Putnam, New York State. Petitioner is appealing the determination of a code enforcement official regarding the applicability of 19 NYCRR Part 1221, Building Code of New York State, Section 303.2, Assembly Group A1, which states Group A1 occupancy includes assembly uses, usually with fixed seating, intended for production and viewing of performing arts or motion pictures, but not limited to theaters. The petitioner is appealing the determination of the code enforcement official, or failing the appeal, would like to seek a variance to allow unsprinkled A1 occupancy group assembly space. Okay. Someone going to step forward and So you have to state your name and your title for the record for the reporter.
Hello, my name is Joey Gentile. I live at 2017 Knott Street in Niskayuna, New York. I work at 525 7th Avenue in Manhattan. I am a senior project consultant at the consulting engineering firm of SGH, and we are part of the project team for the HVSF. Along with me today is Teo Katana with the architecture firm Studio Gang. And we have a couple of members of the project team and the ownership group of HVSF, and I imagine they'll introduce themselves when they take a turn to talk.
Okay.
We do have some images prepared that we can show up on there, if now's the moment for that.
Sure.
Got at least a 50% chance this is going to work on the first try. Hey, look.
Presto.
So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the beginning of the variance, appeal and variance request, and then let Teo, who is much closer to the design and the logic behind the project, tell a little bit more about the building itself, the proposed building. This is the existing Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, which is done in a tent. It operates seasonally in the summers, about 70 days with performances per year. And what they are seeking to do by creating this structure is to make a permanent home on the same site. There's a large, I believe it's 98 acres, open wilderness kind of site, and this building would be standing alone on it. And what we would like to do is sort of turn this tent with this aperture and ground floor performance space, everything about the same scale, into a permanent structure. And with that in mind, Teo?
Sure. Teo Quintana. I live at 930 President Street, Brooklyn, New York. I work for Studio Gang, where I'm the project leader for this performance venue project for the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival. My office address is 50 Broad Street, New York, New York. So with that, thank you for the introduction, Joey. Why don't we flip to the next slide? Just an overview of the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival's operations and theater. HVSF has been a mainstay of the Hudson Valley region since 1987. They do about 75 plays every summer from about Memorial Day to about Labor Day. And they have a general audience over each season of about 30,000 people. Just as this photo shows, HVSF's productions are creative and bold, but their theater making is minimal, spare, and elemental. They're like, as this image is showing, they really do not use large stage scenery. They don't use stage effects. It's a very spare theater. And I think that's going to be important here because this aperture that we're seeing is an important means of egress that will not be blocked. So if we go to the next slide, as Joey was saying, what they're really trying to do with this project is transform a temporary shade structure and temporary set of risers and loose chairs, loose seating into a permanent home. They have a 98-acre site. And so what's really happening is that this this temporary theater, this temporary tent is going to be built as a permanent shade structure. We're going to build a permanent seating rake. And I think another major benefit for both HVSF and the project is that the temporary theater infrastructure becomes permanent here, which is much safer. We have permanent wiring, permanent cabling, though the lights and AV equipment themselves will be rented. So if we go to the next slide, this is just a slide about the site itself that this is happening on. As Joey mentioned, they have a 98-acre site that it's a former golf course. Like most golf courses, it's largely open. It's not a woodland. For reasons of views and also acoustic isolation, the theater itself, the performance space, is located at the heart of the site. If we go to the next slide, this gives you a sense of just how big that landscape is and where the theater is located. It's about 275 feet from the nearest existing structure and stands kind of by itself at the top of a small rise in the land. We go to the next one. This gives you a sense of what the new design is. And so this shade structure roof that we're building in glue laminated timber is really kind of visually similar to what the tent does. And then the seating bowl is really quite similar to the temporary seating bowl that's put up every summer. So if we go to the next slide, just some basic facts. It's about 25,000 square feet of space. The height to that top of the shade structure is about 35 feet. The audience seats about 470 people. And as Joey mentioned, and we mentioned at the top of the hearing, we're type 5B construction. But I think an important note there is on the next slide about like what this roof or what this shade structure is made out of. It's glue laminated timber. These are very large beams. The purlins, the sort of smallest elements in the shade structure, are about 12 inches wide by 18 inches deep. The larger beams are much larger than that. They're about 12 inches wide by 4 and sometimes a little bit more, 48 inches, sometimes as much as 52 inches deep in certain points. So it's a very robust structure. It's different than what you would ordinarily see in type 5B construction. That has to do with the spans that we're working with. So it's not your 5B is mostly used for stick frame. You think of it as kind of like dimensional lumber. This is quite a bit different, at least for the shade structure. So if we go to the next slide, this is a view from the interior of the performance space with the shade structure above. Again, I think this is kind of important to this project. The brand identity of HVSF is very tied into the relationship to the landscape, the openness to the elements, but also this view. And for egress purposes, the brand identity and the openness of the theater are really sort of simpatico. Everyone in the theater looks at this view. It's very clear where one needs to go in the event of an evacuation. So why don't we go to the next one? In terms of what do you want to take over here?
Yeah. For the recording, this is Joey with SGH from the previous introduction. Before we kind of move from what is the project to the features of the project, does the board have any questions about what we just covered?
No.
Sounds good.
We'll hold our questions after your presentations.
Understood. Thank you, sir. So this is this axonometric drawing is showing the three components of this with the shade structure taken aside. Up at the top left blue arrow, you're pointing at the restrooms, which will have its own roof on it. On the right-hand side, you have the back of house and green room space. And then at that arrow pointing at the bottom, there are spaces beneath the seating rake for a variety of functions, some of them fully enclosed, some of them not. And the other area I want to draw your attention to on this image is what are called the commons, and it's the white space in between the circulation. When you see that, I want you to imagine something that is sort of a gravel outdoor floor, 10 feet wide at its narrowest point, approximately 20 feet to the shade structure above. And this whole facility is designed to move people to their seats quickly and then let them depart from their seats quickly. So both on the construction of this project and on the way that it's designed for evacuation, it's going to be over and above what the building codes would normally expect from a building of this type. If you imagine, I know we have the board has a couple of architects and building professionals on it. You go into the building code and you find a construction type based minimum requirement that assumes a certain level of robust construction, a certain level of compartmentation. We're going to exceed that. It has certain expectations about the means of egress and how that egress is provided, stairs, corridors, doors. We have a much more open concept than that when it comes to evacuation. Pretty much any direction. When someone gets up from their seat and decides to depart, they are headed out. And the maximum distance we've clocked from any seat to open to sky out from under the shade structure is 100 feet, which is way below what the building code would allow in an assembly type use. A little bit more about the site. If you see the round shape at the bottom of this, that is sized for fire truck access. Down by the yellow arrow, that is where the fire water systems, including the building sprinkler system, are based, pumps, tanks, etc. And then if you look to your left-hand side of the screen, the red arrow is pointing at a pretty dramatic slope that limits what we can do on the left-hand side of this. This has to do with the views, the overall decisions about siting. Firefighters arriving at this building could bring their vehicles up to the round circle and proceed on foot any one of a number of ways. And we're just showing that 290-foot distance to the backside. In recognition of that, with our fire water infrastructure, we want to put standpipe and hose connections on the backside of that to facilitate a faster fire department response. These are the standpipe connections that you'd see in a taller building. We're just going to provide them here in a lateral sort of way. And what that means is truck-based firefighting should not be necessary in the rear of the building where it's, grass and golf course. They can get over there less hose carrying or hose dragging for responding fire department. Getting to the appeal request, there's multiple types of assembly occupancy. This lives in Chapter 3 of the Building Code. One of those is type A1. A1 is based around your conventional performing arts spaces. It's interior. It has a clear back of house. It has a front of house. It likely has a grand entry lobby. It likely has a proscenium curtain. Those code sections are really designed thinking, or really written rather, thinking about two different types of buildings. One is movie theaters, and the other one is your genuine performing arts center. And we don't think that this building, especially when we consider that it has no walls around it, no entry lobby to speak of, it doesn't even have doors, and there is a strong ventilation opportunity that we'll come to in our smoke study later. We don't think applying Group A1 requirements for an enclosed darkened theater is appropriate to it. Of the other Group A occupancy types, there's Group A5, which is for exterior viewing applications. Now, usually that's sports, but in this case, A5 is about grandstand style seating and natural ventilation. And we would rather be going into permitting under Group A5 because our building, while it remains over-designed with respect to compartmentation, structural fire performance, and egress, it exceeds the requirements for Type 5B in Group A5, but we feel it's a better fit for permitting. And that's the commitments we want to make in the permitting process align better with that than they do with what we perceive as enclosed performing arts-based Group A1 requirements. The similarities this has to Group A5, which I think I might have touched on the last slide, it's outdoor fixed seating. There is no fuel load to speak of because of the spare human-based nature of the performance and the large aperture behind it. They will not be doing Wicked. They will not be doing Phantom of the Opera. There's no fly gallery. There are no pyrotechnics. There's nothing hanging. And then we have looked at our evacuation and smoke models, which we have some videos for you later, and found that in the context of the amount of time it takes for fire to be detected or an evacuation to start, we call those two times pre-movement time together, and then the time that it takes for the actual evacuation with a factor of safety, everybody is gone out from under that shade structure before the effects of a fire, in this case, heat, toxicity, visibility. If you've spent any time with smoke models, you know that visibility is usually the limiting factor on tenability. Before something becomes too hot or too toxic because of smoke, you lose visibility. So that was the main thrust of our study. Here's a section cut through this, and this is another of our examples of over-design. Teo, stop me if I'll go astray here. These enclosed spaces, like the green, that have the green coloration to them, they will have a sprinkler system. Sprinklers will work well within that space. And they are separated from the exterior by 1 hour construction, similar to 1 hour exterior walls. And that's more than we would do in a normal Type 5B building, especially in a Group A5. You can kind of see the scale of the circulation/egress thing between the two areas in green. And then also on the left-hand side, you can see the platform for the performance, which will either be fire protected or sprinklered beneath or a bit of both. We're working on the details of that. Here's kind of that same color logic applied to a floor plan. This is a ground floor plan, so it's cutting through the rake at about 3 feet above the ground. So the blue and red lines represent fire resistance rated walls. And if you look closely, you can see the dashed line of the shade structure above. So what we've got is everywhere there is an enclosed space, we have it sprinklered and we have it separated from whatever is above it or whatever is beside it that is simply under the shade structure with rated construction. And that'll go a long way for property protection. If there ever is going to be a fire at this facility, it is probably going to start in one of these interior spaces because that's where the fuel load and the electrical is present. And that would end up being a sprinkler suppressed fire and detected fairly early. Is there anything else on this video? Here's an isolation of the rated walls, again, to give you an idea of the compartmentation.
Yeah, it's also a good slide. This is Teo Quintana speaking. It's also, I think, a useful slide for seeing the openness of the building. The vomitories there are those spaces in between the pie wedges. Those are wide vomitories that people can enter and exit from. There are 3 staircases coming down from the back of the theater, which are all themselves wide staircases. Inside the theater, there are 4 aisles that people can come down. And then there's the very large opening at the north of the theater to the landscape. So the very kind of like openness of HVSF's desire to have a theater that's open to the elements, that uses the natural landscape as the backdrop for their playmaking, I think is also allowing this building to have a very open and large amount of egress area for people to come and go from the building.
Another picture of the outside, Joey again, emphasizing the openness. You could see the performance there on the right-hand side. You can see the concession space there on the left-hand side. The low point of this, Teo, stop me if I'm wrong, is about 20 feet above the ground. Yeah. And you can see in this case, you know, the width of those stairways coming down, designed for people to move comfortably around the site. Moving on to a little bit about the smoke model. This is a fire dynamics simulation. If we have some technical questions about that, some of my SGH colleagues are on the line as well if needed. But we have gone through the preliminary part of our smoke model and our evacuation model and are awaiting input from both the local code authority and anything from the board to provide more detail. But basically, we have taken what we think is an oversized possible fire event under the shade structure. And what we've conducted is a study. If you see this red plane, this is a horizontal plane about 6 feet above the 10-foot walking surface of the uppermost rake. So the seating rake is about the same as what's done with existing bleachers. It has a little bit of a open air sound booth, control booth, and it is kind of represented in the green floor area here. When we do this smoke model, we are most interested in the conditions that happen at this red plane. How hot does it get? How obstructed is visibility by smoke? How toxic is the air at that location where a person's head might be before they have started to move down and out of the building? And what that turns into is looking at floor plan now. The red dot in the middle is where our design fire is. And you can look at the graph along the outside. The color scheme there. This is temperature, with blue being cool and red being hot. And here we are 4.5 minutes into again, what we consider as a conservative fire event. And you can see that the temperatures up there on that seating rake and elsewhere, they're not getting too high. These are degrees centigrade. And so what we were able to determine is 4.5 minutes in, we do not have a heat problem up at that highest elevation where people are. Heat is accumulating to a degree above the vented roof structure, but it has not gotten hot yet, and we are 4.5 minutes in. So let's look at visibility, which is our other tenability criteria here. So in this case, blue is still good. That is a full 30 feet of visibility. And as you get no more towards the red and scary colors, you're getting less visibility, meaning denser smoke that would prevent you from being able to see in front of you. And if you look at this plan, which is still that 6 foot above the top rake section cut, you can see out at the edges of it where, for the benefit of the people at home, I'm making kind of a dome-shaped gesture with my hands. Where it comes down at the sides, you see that green coloration turning into the tiniest little bit of yellow. And what that is right under the edge of the roof structure where it dips down, you finally have 4.5 minutes in, enough smoke coming down to cut the visibility down to about 1/3 of what it was before. And that was our failure criteria on tenability. I mean, notably, the rest of that area of the seeding rake is in pretty good shape. It's got almost no smoke buildup. The smoke buildup is happening at the edges. And just mostly for the fire department's reference and to let everybody kind of know how the model works, here we are 6 minutes in. And again, you've still got a very clear area at the center of the rake, but now you can see that there's a lot more smoke kind of doing the thing where it comes down and out at the edges of the shade structure, and it's built up a lot more. Of course, this is 6 minutes in. Per our analysis, the people are long gone.
And just to stop on why the roof works that way, the reason it dips down at the edge is twofold. The theater that HVSF does is spoken word theater, so the intimacy of the space is really important to the ability of the audience to hear. And so that's why the roof gets low at the edges. It holds that sound energy in. But it also has the added benefit of preventing any noise that is taking place in the theater from getting out, which was an important criteria in our approvals process that was raised by community members, that any noise generated in that theater not affect adjacent properties. So that kind of like the kind of shape of the roof is important to the theater making that HVSF likes to do.
Yeah, so if you are the fire department showing up 6 minutes after a fire event has started, this is kind of the conditions that they would encounter. They would encounter a central area that is mostly free of smoke, and you would have smoke kind of coming out from under. This is cut lower. It does not show the series of roof vents that are included. So in addition to going out the sides, we have some sort of rain can't get in, but air can get out venting designed at the top, kind of at the peak of the structure where it's most useful to getting the effects of fire out. Moving on from there and towards our evacuation analysis, which is the companion to that smoke and fire performance analysis. If this was an enclosed building, it could have 2 exits, probably 3 door widths. It could have travel distances of 200 feet to 400 feet, depending on how it was classified. It would have doors, and it would have no requirement for mechanical ventilation systems. But to contrast that, on the right-hand side, and I'm losing power.
Okay, let's see if I've got one that works.
Do I have an outlet?
There's another side of that.
So only take a moment, sorry about that.
Where there's
I really thought I could make it. Thought I had it.
all those images. There's one right here.
Please, the cord. I'm going to come over and sit next to Neil, where the cord will reach.
No, I got you.
You'll need a microphone there.
Oh, sorry.
So as Joey is working on that, the slide that we were discussing related to the design of the space versus what would be required by code.
Is that required by code in an A1 occupancy or an A5 occupancy?
I compared it to the A1.
Okay.
It's over-designed for A1, and that was one of my favorite conclusions that I came to as we studied this. There's no doors. There is no door between an audience member and the outside world, which is a pretty unique situation in a building of any kind.
Yeah, our feeling was that if A1 is for buildings that are primarily indoors and we have no doors, it was unusual to apply the criteria of that to a building with no doors.
Yeah, this is also a place where that designing the seating environment to get people into their seats comfortably and out of their seats comfortably. We end up, if you're a Chapter 10 of the building code fan, hopefully we've got some people on the call, there is a minimum width requirement that goes with the number of people present, and we are at 2.5 times over that, even in its most conservative form. Sort of last but not least, before we get to the egress on this, we did pick up in our design some Group A5 features. If you go to the Group A5 chapters on the code, you find that it is not required to be sprinklered in the areas where the people are seating. You'll find that they want to have rated compartmentation and separation from the areas below the seating rake or adjacent to it. And our design has picked up all of that. So we are applying the Group A5 related requirements to this.
Which would be in excess of the A1 requirement.
It would be in excess of A1, and it's also in excess of 5B in a lot of ways. And then so last but not least, the reasons we've come to you with this appeal request is that in Group A5, sprinkler systems are not required to cover all of the building. You'll note all the enclosed areas are sprinkler protected, but the shade structure is not. And also a Group A5 classification allows us to go into the height and area requirements of Chapter 5 using that Type 5B construction type and level of expectations and commitments in the code. And that's very compatible with the intent of the project as designed. Yeah, that sort of brings us to the end of our pre-made part, although I do have some videos to show you at some point.
Okay, let's, and now the videos are,
More on the smoke and more on the evacuation to put some numbers to those.
Do you want to speak a little bit about the evacuation time?
Yeah, let me attempt to fade again with the screen share.
We see this, the reason I raised this is that if the fire is one side of the equation, the other is the speed of exit, which is something we've talked about a considerable amount.
So this is a program called Pathfinder, which originates in transportation planning, but is also used for fire evacuation. And with the right set of inputs in it from the Society for Fire Protection Engineering, we get a realistic approach to evacuation and evacuation times, which we then load a healthy factor of safety onto for the unpredicted. And what we ended up with is people who would be aware of fire smoke underneath the shade structure within 30 seconds. There is research that anticipates once they are aware there is a fire event, that it would take about 36 seconds for them to start to move. I think that's conservative in this space, especially considering the visibility of any problem event and the level of staffing. The HVASF audience has a lot of trained staff around it who would start to facilitate an evacuation. And we ended up with, we're still seeing them progressing to the outside, but they have cleared within approximately 70 seconds the top rake where that fire, the effects of that fire are first going to be felt. So when we add up the free movement time and we add up the movement time, which we just saw, and apply a factor of safety to the movement time, we get that everybody is off and away from the top of the seating rake in under 3 minutes. And we compare that very favorably to the 4.5 minutes before any concerns arise about the level of safety of somebody who's still on that top rake. And I guess while we're at it, we saw some stills from this earlier, but this is visibility deteriorating over time, a minute in, 2 minutes in. You can see the little fire plume cutting through our plane there in the middle. And then as we get up to 250, 290 seconds, you'll start to see stuff happening out at the edges of the shade structure. Again, still, here we are, 200 seconds in, there is no deterioration of visibility along the top. There it is at the top rec. So that's starting to deteriorate, becoming untenable at 290. And here we go. Presentation finished. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll entertain questions from the board members. After that, we'll ask if there's anybody here in person who would like to speak regarding the petition, and also anybody who has joined us remotely. Okay, so all right, so why don't we start with the remote members first? So Mark, do you want to start us off, please?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of questions to help us understand the risk. First question I have is I'm trying to understand the risk to the heating system that you have underneath in your enclosed areas. So what's the source of the proposed permanent heating system?
The heating system is a VRF system. The main plant of the system is located in the back of house building. Refrigerant, there are chillers in a yard near the fire truck access. Those chillers send chilled water into the back of house building. That is then distributed from a main control unit in the back of house building in cold water piping to fan coil units, which are in each space.
Heat as well?
Heat as well. The system does both. Since the building operates May to October, heating has not been a major design criteria of the building, but because the system can provide heat, it is a heated building. And also because of building code, and we have to address like the heating load of the building. Would you like more information? Is that sufficient?
Well, I'd like to know what the source is. So is it natural gas? Is it propane?
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. It's electric. There's no gas on the project.
Okay, thank you. Can you help us understand, or help me understand how you got to the $247,000 number for the sprinklering of the space when you basically have the infrastructure and fire pump already incorporated as part of the design? So how did we get to $247,000 to put sprinklers in the open air space?
Yeah, I can field that one. So what Mark's referring to from one of our exhibits is the initial contractor estimate, where the sprinkler system for the project, its infrastructure and sprinklering the enclosed spaces costs about $250,000. And then we had a high-level contractor estimate based on square footage style estimation that put an absolute floor on the cost of additionally providing a sprinkler system into the roof structure. And that was the additional 247 number that appears. We have since dug into that with them more. And there are two costs associated with providing sprinklers under the shade structure. First, there's the design fee and the complex shape of the shade structure. This is not a simple ceiling condition where they can simply lay out the sprinklers. It has to be designed. It has to follow the curve of the roof. The sprinkler piping has to be very well thought out in advance and then costed. So that is probably $50,000 to $100,000 of engineering design work. And until they see that design, the contractor is not willing to commit, and I believe this was one of the letter exhibits, to a final price on the sort of the delta for sprinklering the shade structure.
Yeah, to put a finer point on that, because the sprinklers, if you put a conventional sprinkler layout in here, you would end up with a orthogonal pipe grid, and it would probably conflict with the lighting positions that a theater needs. It would hang in a place where a theater light would cast a shadow because there'd be a sprinkler pipe or sprinkler head in the way. And so in order to get the sprinkler piping to work with the shape of the theater roof, you'd need to have curved sprinkler pipe, which is a really large expense. Sprinkler pipe is very rarely curved, and we would have to be custom curving it. There are not a lot of facilities that can do that. We'd probably be sending the sprinkler pipe far away to get curved. And then we would probably have to very carefully engineer our roof to allow those curved pipes to pass through the beams.
All right, thank you. The other question I had was just some clarity on your occupant load, because Exhibit 1 in your presentation calls out the occupant load of around 460, but your drawing G003 calls out 736 just for the A occupancy.
Well, another good question. So for the seating layouts have been in flux until this week as they iron out the commercial and experience details of that. We did get what we're calling the final layout of seats now, which is, where do we land on that?
440 standard with an adult to add a few seats to 472, I think.
So seats plus wheelchair spaces of 449 to 470. And then any final evacuation models, we would throw some staff in there as well, some performance people in there. But that's not really going to affect our end egress. And we've already got the prescriptive egress widths and locations and travel distances for them.
And I can speak a little bit to that number. What's going on there is the concession area was added to the theater load. So it was as if the concession was filled with a separate other group of people. The concession area is quite large, so on a per square foot basis, that dumps a lot of extra people in. That's not how the theater would actually operate, though. Anybody who's coming to the theater who buys the ticket, would be the people who would be in the concession area. So what you're seeing there is like a large chunk of additional people based on like a square footage total, as opposed to like how the theater should and would operate.
Right. Other question I had was with your fire modeling. So instead of asking a lot of modeling questions, I think it's more appropriate to ask is, are you working with an FPE to evaluate your fire modeling and egress analysis?
Yes. Chinru, you did the quality assurance on this. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, nice to meet the board member. I'm a fire protection engineer licensed in the New York State. So we did the smoke, it's a timed egress modeling combined with two parts, as Joey mentioned, the FDS fire modeling and the egress modeling to show the people can safely evacuate before the condition getting worse. So we will provide the stamped report at the end of the project to support this analysis.
Great, thank you.
Chinru, could you quickly give us the address, your home address and name, and the full title? You've earned the full title.
Sure, yeah. I'm at the same address as Joey, working at the Simpson Campus and Hager, 525 7th Avenue, New York. Um, that's it. I'm a senior project management manager and Simpson Campus and Hager.
Professional engineer, state of New York, and doctorate in, help me out with this.
University of Michigan. Thank you.
So yeah, this has undergone our quality assurance process on the modeling. And also not here is our principal level engineer, David Jacoby, who is on vacation. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to be subjected to me.
And last question I have right now is smoke hatches. Did you take a look at putting smoke hatches in there to help alleviate some of the concerns, or is that added protection feature for evacuation?
Good question. Right now, the model reflects, I want you to kind of imagine a pop out at the top. Now, these are not really visible from below or from out on the site, but you can imagine that the shade structure, if you were looking at it from above, you would see a lot of rectangular panels, give or take 9-foot long rectangles. I think we have in that model, 4 of those rectangles are lifted up about 6 inches, such that again, rain can't get in, but heat and air and smoke can pass through. So that gap around those is modeled into it. So they're not hatches in the sense that they open and close, they're always open. And that's the size the modeled size of the openings there is the size we settled on to get the performance we wanted out of not having smoke or fire build up at that plane.
Great, excellent answer. Thank you. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Jane?
Good morning, everyone. I just have a few questions. Mark did a good job of asking some of the technical questions. You speak to 2-hour fire separations between the back house spaces and the seating, but I didn't see any details in reference to that. Can you talk about the construction of that and how that assembly will be achieved?
The separation between those spaces is 1 hour. Our fire partition schedule is on A600 and 601 of the architectural drawing set. It's achieved through layers of type X gypsum board.
Because of the exterior nature of the circulation, they're a lot like your 1 hour exterior wall builds-ups.
Yes, I'd say the exterior face of those walls will be fire-rated plywood. That's fire-treated plywood. That's because they are exterior walls. We need them to also keep moisture out and be appropriate for attaching our waterproofing membrane to. And then the ceilings as well of the space will have two layers of gypboard on the underside.
Okay, and then there was a note from the state about the fire apparatus access road. Is what you're proposing compliant with code for the access road?
So fire department access it comes out of Chapter 5 of the fire code and its appendices. We comply with everything, and then there is to the discretion of the responding authority portion of that speaks to firefighter routes around the building perimeter. Ours are on the long side, but to walk all the way around the outside to the far rear of the building, we've got that 290-foot dimension. To be fully prescriptively compliant with the fire code, the limitation on that from truck to far point on the exterior of the building is limited to 150 feet of walking. Ours is longer than that, but that distance can be expanded at the discretion of the responding fire captain. To give some people some context on fire department response, firefighters get hurt 2 ways. One, when they're on the roof of a burning building, which is not going to be the case here. and two, when roofs collapse. And so that's why there's this interest in firefighters being able to move around the exterior of the building with hoses and such. Now they can do that on foot on both sides and get to the rear. And one of our typical ways of dealing with that when it's longer than it might otherwise be is that we have extensions of the sprinkler system that give them things that they can connect to on the far side of the building. These are your 2.5-inch and 1.5-inch hose connections of the kind that you might see in a stairway enclosure of a medium-sized or tall building. So instead of dragging a hose around the outside, they can hook up on either end of a pipe that is already in place. And that is what we intend to present to the responding fire department as we get into the permitting process. The code officials have seen the initial issue for permit set, but the general back and forth and explanation and haggling of the permitting process is only now beginning.
So with that said, and thank you for your explanation, and I do, and the members of the board, we all are very familiar with firefighting operations, but my concern would be then you don't have a clear direction from the local fire official regarding compliance and whether or not he's willing to accept what you're proposing.
No, we do not.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Megan?
Yeah, I'll follow up on the standpipe to start with. Is it a dry standpipe or a wet standpipe?
I would vote dry on that because at some point, the very end of it is going to need to be dry to get it out to beyond the shade structure. It could be an extension of the wet part of a wet system, but the anticipation, how I would anticipate they'd want to use it is that they would want to have a dry main going out there that they could plug into at a fire department connection on one side and then pull water out of at the far side. Fire department connection, for folks who don't run into that term every day, is the inlet that you'll see on the outside of the building that the fire truck can pump water into to boost the sprinkler system or to make use of standpipes. And that would likely be used because the amount of water quality and performance that is needed to operate sprinklers is less than is needed to operate standpipes, especially if sprinklers are going off elsewhere in the building. So they would want to be boosting that. And so in that case, dry is probably appropriate.
And this is, all of this proposed sprinkler system is supplied by this tank and pump house, or is there municipal water?
There's no municipal water. It's supplied by the tank and pump house.
And so it's been, the quantity has been looked at and, but may need to be modified for these newly proposed standpipes.
They have water trucks, as I understand it. So they'd be bringing their own water. Their truck is a water tank with a pump on it and various hose outs.
So your fire department connection would be on the fire access circle side.
It would probably be near the fire pump house.
Is the rest of your proposed sprinkler system underneath the rake and all through also a dry system?
It is.
Do you, at the standpipes on the far side, you're proposing that the firemen carry their hoses to that point, or will there be hoses stationed there to use?
It's a very good question. We would leave that up to them. We can provide them. Many fire departments counterintuitively do not want to have equipment like that on site because they don't know that it's going to be there or be in proper condition when they use it, which could be, years and years out. So Our expectation is that they will probably want to bring their own because they know their equipment. But again, when we are into the heart of the permitting process with the local official, we'll work with them.
Yeah, I think that the distance of 150 has to do with hose lengths from trucks, and also you're doubling it almost. And to carry, I don't know if you've ever picked up a fire hose, but it's very, very heavy. And these are volunteers, right? Is this the Garrison Fire Department?
Yes.
So, you know, I might be a volunteer firefighter and I'm not carrying a hose 300 feet, right? So, I think that, I would really have loved there to be someone from the fire department here to talk to this. But let me ask my other questions. The Lula that you have to the limited use lift to go up to the walk around area for accessibility purposes. Do you know how long it takes to call that? And if someone were to be on the walk around area up top, how long it would take if it were down below, load somebody on and bring them down?
Yes, we did some studies of that. The Lula lifts are of the slower variety, at least the types that have been specified so far. Our expectation is that we should be designing for 3 wheelchairs to be on the top rake. 2 of those are seats, accessibility requirements want us to have our wheelchair seat locations spaced out for a number of reasons for user quality. We also want to engage the possibility that we would have a usher or sound technician type person who might have mobility impairments. And so what we have as our response to that, or rather our approach to that, is we've got the Lula will remain operational, but that on its own is slower than the egress time of the people. I am not worried about that because of some of the conservatism built into our fire. The other thing that we have going for it is the width of the stairways. So we have, if you have a floor plan handy, we have both the stepped aisles through the seating rake, and we have the wide straight run stairways on either side. Those are all above 4 feet, some of them above 5 feet. And in the event of a fire, staff or just generally dudes can help a wheelchair down any straight run stair, provided it's got that 4 feet of width. A narrower stair or a switchback stair is a different situation, but these stairs for the 10 feet, if this becomes a problem, we are not totally reliant on elevator evacuation. This will be a staff training issue.
Okay, yeah, and the proposed location of the lift happens to be in the area that your smoke model shows the smoke will start to develop on the end, right? So you might consider relocating that lift.
That lift is located there.
It's a little closer to that. I'd have to look.
Okay.
Yeah, the lift location there has to do with what we think may be the primary use. We wanted it to be easily accessible to the back of house in case the person who is using it is coming from the back of house as a sound technician or usher.
Speaking of the technical staff, does anybody staff the catwalks during the performances?
No, there will not be staff on the catwalk during the performance.
What is the underside of the roof construction, basically the ceiling? That wasn't pointed out.
Of the roof under the rake or the shade structure?
The shade structure.
It's GLT, glue laminated timber of 1.5 inches, and then 2 layers of plywood on top of that.
Okay, so the actual finish underneath is
GLT.
okay.
And then there are planks. There are also plywood acoustic reflectors in certain parts of the space.
Okay. I see that the stage and the rake is also wood construction. Had you ever considered doing concrete and steel?
We had, for which part do you mean?
The rake and, you know, underneath the seats and underneath the stage.
We had considered concrete and steel for both kind of embodied carbon reasons, and also the desire of the theater to be in relation to the natural landscape and therefore made out of wood. We decided to move away from steel and concrete.
As for the this performance platform there, in the early stage of the design, that was going to be a gravel type fixed thing. For quality of performance reasons, that is now wood with a concealed space beneath. It's going to be fire blocked. We're going to figure out if fire retardant treated wood is the right solution for that. It's got a little going on there with moisture, with loads on it, with acoustics. And we also have the ability to sprinkler under that. Right now we are talking with the contractor about the best way to create that platform space that's sort of set into the ground.
We also felt that a hard surface was safer in the end, both for the actors and also for patrons.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a concrete slab and still have sleepers and wood on top, right? I'm just, if for fire barrier reasons, it would seem, you know, you also, the walk around is all wood as well, right? Which is do you have that hour separation that you talked about on the spaces below on that's as well?
On both of those, so on the first one about the construction of the performance platform, it could be that. That was our first instinct. In discussing internally with our kind of technical directors, the feeling was that if we did a concrete slab with sleepers and wood, because of the exposure to the elements, particularly at the north end, it would deteriorate very, very quickly, because any water that got on it would probably be very close to the wood and not easily ventilated. We were really concerned that any wood boards that form the surface would pop off as they expanded, because it's not like in a traditional wood deck, you can space the boards apart pretty far, but because they want to make theater on this, we're going to pull the spacing of those boards pretty tight. We're going to use black locust wood, which, you know, doesn't expand too much, but it still does expand on a humid day, and especially if there's water from a rainstorm the night before sitting underneath on a concrete slab. We wanted to do something that is going to just be kind of like long-lived for the project, and we didn't want them to have to be ripping up the floor every couple of years to replace it. And that was our concern. Like, it's certainly simpler to do like a concrete slab and sleepers and then a wood performance surface. It's just that north edge just is like going to get a lot of rain, wind-driven rain, and snow in the winter. And we didn't think it would be the right solution long-term. And then on the construction of the compartments underneath the rig, there's a 1 hour rated ceiling. It's 2 layers of gyp on the ceiling that both provides the fire rating, but it also actually is very important acoustically. There's theater equipment, especially in that center wedge of the pie. And that space needs to be isolated from any buzzing noise. So it's 2 layers of gyp, a resilient clip, and then the cavity is stuffed with insulation with mineral wool.
Okay, and then I think my last question, thank you for your patience, is there are some spaces under there that are not fully 1 hour enclosed, the changing rooms or something like that, right? So can you explain? I'm presuming the storage areas and the areas that's what you have completely.
Yeah, the reason for that is how they operate their theater. Those spaces they have a closure on them for the end of the night. But when they are operating, they will open those doors, and that's where the actors will dash in to make a quick change, or will pick up a prop. And since the door will remain open when audience members are in the seats, it did not make sense to try to rate that.
It is sprinklered there though, because where we have a ceiling or surface that can accommodate a sprinkler, we'll have them. Yeah.
And the cavity spaces under the staircases will also be sprinkled.
I think, I also had a question about venting or smoke hatches in the roof. So even though not shown in your submission, that is something that's gonna happen.
It's something I think
There's a picture of it in the smoke study. If you have that handy, you can get an idea of where those appear on the roof plan.
Do you want to speak about how beneficial those are or not beneficial?
They bought us about, we ran it with and without the vents. And this is also how we came around to a size of the vent. And what we got out of the vents was about 50 seconds more of tenability than we would have had if the only place for heat or smoke to go was out the sides.
I mean, we would prefer to not do those because it causes some risk from rain getting in it. The structure, glue laminated timber does not like to get wet. And so like any way we can reduce the risk of the primary structure getting damaged over time from rainwater, we would prefer, but we're willing to accept what this board thinks is the safest approach.
Okay, I did have one last question about the site and again, the fire access there. So the site is already, the topography of the site is as it is, or is there work that needs to be done to create this?
There is grading work that is being done. What that work largely does is allow us to build the fire access road at an acceptable slope up the back of the hill, and then to bring an ADA accessible pathway up from the parking garage. There's a little bit of work that's done to allow the levels of each of the buildings to be the same, 625, so that we don't have any slopes or access issues in between the performance space, the back of house, the public washroom. The land, though, to do that needs to fall away pretty quickly in every direction. Very quickly on the west, because that's a very natural steep slope there. And then on the east, it also needs to fall away because we're trying to adjust it to get this flat space in between all of our buildings. But then we have to get back to the natural grade. And this kind of goes to this, this question of truck access.
Yeah, I see you, what I think is your accessible path kind of looping around to the north and coming up.
Mhm.
You know, it is wider than the other paths that you were proposing. I'm wondering why, if it couldn't just be made wider, right? To allow fire truck access, so.
Yeah, part of our concern is that to allow fire truck access requires turf blocking the landscape. And like, given that the desire of the theater is to be like of a piece with the natural landscape around it, that's not a particularly desirable pathway for us, nor do we think that it's the most beneficial necessarily for the responding fire department.
It becomes a lot as well because the fire code basically wants no one to have to back up a fire truck, but truck in reverse and back it up longer than 150 feet. So if we were to come out of that round circle where the fire trucks are, if we wanted to go any longer than 150 feet around the outside, now we're talking about not just the 20-foot wide Grasscrete Road, but also some version of a turnaround, which can be not the full rectangle, but parts of a rectangle that are like 40 by 70 tacked onto the end of the 20 feet. And it rapidly becomes a lot of grading, a lot of Grasscrete, and taking away from the object in the park kind of vibes on the north and east side of the building.
Okay. That's it for my questions right now.
Shane?
You said there's no doors. I was just curious as to, so how is controls provided right when you come into the site, or how is it that nobody, like security wise?
The ticketing is done at the parking lot.
It is, right?
There's
So
a,
then there's no physical blocks. There was kind of an alluded a little bit in the presentation and the increase in fire resistance of the structure and its size. I mean, can you talk about the fire resistance of blue lamps at all?
Sure.
Timber?
So for folks who've never run into glued laminated lumber before, what they do is at the factory, they use glues and pressure to push a whole bunch of little pieces of lumber that are easily farmed into big, giant cross sections and shapes. And that sort of glued lam acts in fire basically the same as a solid sawn type 4 mass timber style lumber. And it responds to fire in a couple of ways. The first is on its surface. So a glued lam beam has basically class A interior finish properties as far as a smoke spread and flame developed, which is in line with the best interior finishes, which is a good news. It also has the property of charring and pyrolysis, where fire starts from the outside, where the inner part of the mass timber element is still doing its structural job, which makes it very different than regular dimensional lumber. So if you have ever made a campfire, you can't just take a log and set the outside of the log on fire. It's very hard to get it started. It has to be built up from other fires. And then when you do get your campfire log started, it burns from the outside in, where the outer layers of the wood start to be first weakened by a process called pyrolysis and heating, and then eventually turn into char. But even as the outside burns, the inside is still there doing its job structurally, and in this case being over-designed for aesthetic purposes. And that is how you get to mass timber being counterintuitively higher quality in terms of fire performance than, say, unprotected steel.
And that's kind of what you were alluding to in the, even though it's a type 5.
Right. If we are following, our intent is to follow the group A5 construction type VB requirements, but what we are building is much more robust than a VB in this respect.
Can you just explain, please, where exit 1B goes to? That's the pathway off to the side here. In the model, it seemed like a large majority, or let's say a large quantity of people were going off to 1B. And I just was curious, because you talked about slopes. Also, just to clarify, exit 1A, which is off the stage, I mean, how much space is there realistically before it dropped off, or how many people can congregate there?
so there's a pathway on the screen. That orange arrow is pointed at the pathway.
Right.
That leads to a gathering space north of the theater. The pathway is kind of right at the lip of the hill. We're actually doing some grading work to make that pathway work out. We're kind of pushing the slope just a little bit.
So it looks like you've got an accessible sidewalk style thing going off there that's probably 4 feet, maybe 5 feet.
That's right. It is a space that is meant part of the theater making that HVSF likes to do is to have people kind of appear out of the landscape. And so there's a feature to the north of the theater that's referred to as the Belvedere on our plans. And so that pathway that's there is during normal conditions to allow actors to leave the back of house, proceed at an ADA accessible slope to the north, and then go to this Belvedere where they would either give a talk or then pop out of the landscape.
We've also tweaked the model in a few different ways to see what it will do with different assumptions about how much people will want to just go out to the landscape versus how much they will insist on going back the way they came in towards their car. And we found that it didn't really move the movement time numbers off of the top rake more than a few seconds either way. So we've been looking at the way that people progress away from the sides of this, out from under the shade structure.
Thank you. So it sounds like 1B has a clear direction to go out, but 1A off of the stage. So what's your people who would be egressing from that space? Would there be sufficient space in the grass, or would they be needing to go to the side to join another exit?
That's the lawn, right?
That's
That's kind of an audience picnicky area out there that's definitely suitable for people to move away from the building on. No fall off there.
Oh, great. Is there a fire alarm system or any sort of occupant notification system?
Yes. We'll have all the normal visible and audible fire alarms in there. We will have smoke detection in the enclosed spaces. And then under the roof, under the shade structure rather, we would have some version of heat detection. Smoke detectors will not do well out there, but there will be a heat detector type solution out there as well. But that is for off-season fire department response reasons, more so than for evacuation purposes. Where the fire alarm system would have its moment is if during a performance, there was a fire in one of the concealed spaces that got picked up by the smoke detectors before it got picked up by staff.
And in that case, there would be notification of the people in the space.
Yeah, strobes and I believe voice, plus you've got the staff will be trained on what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, we think there's certainly, yes. Short answer, yes.
I personally would like to hear a little bit more information about the standpipe system, the size of the pump that's proposed, and the size of the tank, the location of those standpipes, whether or not they have a cabinet. I mean, meaning, are they a class 1 or class 3? It doesn't sound like that information is readily available, but I will say that I think that's something I would like to see.
The pump and the tank are sized. We should have those on the plumbing drawings somewhere.
Yeah, they're on the plumbing drawings. I don't know the size of the pump or the tank off the top of my head, though the tank.
Size flow rating there.
I don't know off the top of my head. We'd have to.
They'd be sized for the sprinklers. It will be an NFPA 813 sprinkler system under there. Yeah, I'd have to revisit our sprinkler design assumptions and in the FP set.
Well, that as was, you kind of alluded that the standpipe will probably control the design. I mean, you probably have to consider both at the same time. But, what I was really curious is how many flowing standpipes would it be designed for? Is it, we're looking at 500 gallon per minute flows, 750 gallon per minute flows? That's really what I was curious to know, is how many standpipes can flow, because you do have quite a distance between them. I believe that was all of my questions. I will say also, I think based on the smoke model, it kind of looks like the smoke migrating towards the 2 staircases, which are the exits. I don't know if that's prohibitive to the design.
Well, that is after they're gone, and there are also these stepped aisles down in the three stepped aisles down? Four stepped aisles down in the middle. So in assembly occupancies are concerns things like common path of travel and people becoming trapped, and that's not one of our concerns.
I think here you can see, so there are 3 staircases. The 2 smaller staircases at the walk around drop from points where the smoke, I think, is not building up as a concern. The main feature stair on the left-hand side of the screen here, yes, I think your point is valid, but as Joey's pointing out, There are 4 aisles as well that would allow people to get down to the performance space and then exit out either through the 2 vomitories or through the north.
Thank you. That's all I have.
The fire access road, that's from the Route 9 entrance.
It would be from either. There's sort of like a road that connects Route 9 and then also from Snake Hill Road. So the fire truck could get to it. Yeah, this is a good drawing. You could either come in off of Route 9 by going on this road that would bypass that parking lot and then come up the back that way, or you could come in off of Snake Hill Road.
Is Route 9 on the plan right?
Correct.
And you mentioned the grading of the proposed access road. What type of percent grade are you talking about?
I don't know that off the top of my head. What is being done in the civil set is to change the grading to make it acceptable and more even.
It sounds like, and I'm speaking from knowledge of the codes they're following, not having the civil drawings handy, but fire truck access roads in the direction of travel max out at 10%, so it's going to be less than 10%. And if we're also saying that there will be people, if they choose not to get dropped off in front, who are going to be following an accessible route up through there, then we're looking at likely an 8% cap on that. So it's pretty flat to get up to that circle.
And I didn't see it, maybe I missed it, but the total cost of this project that it stands right now, it's about what?
It's about 25 million.
25 million?
Yeah. That is based on a cost estimate that was done on our 100% DD documents. We expect that number to become there to be greater certainty now that we've advanced the drawings further.
Okay, that's it. So we will move on to the anybody here in the audience who would like to speak either in support, opposition to the appeal/variance. Anyone here? No? Okay. And is there anyone joining us remotely who would like to speak regarding the petition?
Mr. Chairman, I have one follow-up question, if I could, please.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yep. So I'd like to hear from the FPE on the model and its evaluation of ADA evacuation on the upper level.
Yes, currently our report has not included the elevator like movement in the timed egress. We are working on it. So something we are thinking about is potentially area of refuge area placed in front of the space. No matter it's in front of the stair landing or in front of the elevator. So that's why it's have not been included. So you are right. The current report is a draft report. We are aware of this concern that the Lula elevator is too slow and it may potentially go beyond the available egress time. So we will address them in the final version.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, this is Joe again. One of the reasons that we're focusing on staff training and assisted evacuation is that when you start to get into codes for elevators as required means of egress, you start to get to some knock-on effects for other systems to support that elevator. And it just starts climbing into things that are not necessarily feasible or part of the building or as it was originally conceived to do occupant evacuation elevators as a self, in the same sense that you would have it if occupant evacuation elevators were used from an upper floor of a building.
Understand, but we should also remember that crowd control managers are also humans, and have they been exposed to fire before, or fire conditions, and how they'll react? Will they really take care of that person that needs assistance is another question.
Fair enough.
Okay, so wrapped up the questions, we wrapped up the comments from the public. I At this point, we're going to go into deliberations. Okay, so if you don't mind, we're going to ask you to step down. Eric, we're going to go off the record. Okay, we're back on. Megan, do you have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In respect to petition number 2024-0385, Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, the petition pertains to an appeal of the code official's determination regarding the occupancy group of a building, 1 story, 35 feet in height, approximately 25,700 square feet in gross floor area, construction type 5B wood frame, and located at 2015 US Route 9, Town of Phillipstown, County of Putnam, New York State. The petitioner is appealing the determination of a code enforcement official regarding the applicability of 19 NYCRR Part 1221, the Building Code of New York State, Section 303.2, Assembly Group A1, which states Group A1 occupancy includes assembly uses, usually with fixed seating, intended for the production and viewing of the performing arts or motion pictures, including but not limited to theaters. The petitioner is appealing the determination of the code official. The board makes the following findings. 1, the petition pertains to construction of an unenclosed parentheses outdoor assembly structure for the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, which has received major funding from the New York State Council on the Arts. 2, subject petition pertains to the appeal of the local code enforcement official determination that the subject property be classified as a group A1 theater occupancy. 3, the ICC commentary for A5 occupancy states that in order to be qualified as an outdoor facility, a structure must be one where the products of combustion are freely and rapidly vented to the atmosphere. 4, the applicant submitted a smoke study documenting that the products of combustion will be vented to the atmosphere as the structure has no exterior walls. 5, the applicant notes in Exhibit 1 that to extend the sprinkler system to the underside of the roof assembly would cost an additional $247,000. 6, applicant has requested that failing this appeal, that a variance be granted from sections 508.4 and 903.2.1 of the Building Code of New York State. 7, 19 NYCRR section 1205.4C states that in cases before a regional board of review on appeal, the board may fashion suitable remedies so as to do justice among the parties, including but not limited to 1, where an order or determination has been made, sustaining, reversing, or modifying in whole or in part such order or determination. 8, the local code official has been contacted in this matter and does not support the reversing of the appeal, but does not object to the granting of a variance under Part 1205. 9, that the Board of Review finds and determines that the issuance of a variance will not have a significant adverse environmental impact or any significant fish or wildlife habitat, scenic resource of statewide significance, important agricultural land or area included in an approved local waterfront revitalization program. 10, that the Department of State is authorized to sign and deliver on behalf of the Board of Review and the Department of State, the State Environmental Assessment Form indicating that no or small impact may occur in response to each question in Part 2 and determining in Part 3 of the form that proposed action will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts. In view of the above findings, the board sustains the appeal for the petitioner and therefore reverses the termination of the code enforcement official. The granting of this appeal will not substantially adversely affect the Uniform Code's provisions for health, safety, and security. Wherefore, it is determined that the application appealing the determination of a code enforcement official is granted regarding the application of the above noted sections with the following conditions. 1, the proposed smoke vents are incorporated in the construction. 2, a safety plan must be submitted to the local fire official that includes the conditions as outlined in Exhibit 1, page 2. 3, 2-hour ceiling construction shall be provided at the rooms with the 2-hour rated partitions. 4, fire access plan, standpipe locations, fire alarm and smoke detection in enclosed spaces, heat detection under the canopy, strobes, and the NFPA 13 system are to be reviewed and approved by the local fire code official. 5, provide adequate egress during provide adequate accessible means of egress during smoke conditions. So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we have a motion granting the appeal in favor of the applicant. Okay. So we're going to vote individually before we.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yep. Did I hear or not hear that that the fire modeling would have a PE stamped and signed as part of the report submission to the local municipality?
So we'll add that in. What was that number?
6.
Number 6?
So condition number 6, Mark, why don't you say it
That
again?
the fire modeling report be signed and stamped by an FPE and submitted to the local municipality.
Okay, so we, as I stated, we have a motion granting the appeal in favor of the applicant. Before we vote individually, have any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, so we're all going to vote.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I'm sorry. Shaheen seconded. A vote of yes is granting the appeal in favor of the applicant. So we'll start with Jane.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mark,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Shaheen,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. That's it.
Right.
Okay, back to the world record.
Thank you, board members, and Neil,